So welcome to this afternoon session, everyone. So we have a session about learning online, and with us we have Rebecca and Jackie again. I will let them introduce themselves and begin the presentation.
All right. Hello, everyone. Thank you so much for joining us this afternoon. My name is Rebecca. I am a PhD candidate in the Faculty of Education. I started my PhD program last year in the summer of 2019. It was the same time when I joined the Academic Learning Center as a writing tutor. And I'm an international student. I'm from Brazil, but I feel that Winnipeg is my home now. And and I'll just pass now to Jackie.
Great, thanks Rebecca. I'm Jackie. I'm also an ALC Academic Learning Center writing tutor, and I've been working with them since 2016. I'm also an international student, and if you're wondering where from after this whole week of hearing my voice, I'm from South Africa. And I wouldn't quite say Winnipeg is home yet. The winters are tough, and I'm used to my nearly year-long summer, but I'm getting used to it, right? All you can do.
Absolutely.
Great, so I'm going to start sharing the screen.
All right. So our presentation today should last for about a little bit less than an hour. And we're going to open up for questions at the end. So make sure you keep your questions and throw them in the chat for us so that we can respond to them later on. So this is just a brief overview of what we're going to be talking about today. So some myths about online learning, common pitfalls in an online class, academic integrity, expectations, strategies for online learning, and resources for success. And so before we begin, we have a question for you. What are your major concerns when you think about online learning? So there will be a poll that is going to open now in your window. So if you could just choose what answer fits best for you. And I'm going to throw the question to Jackie while you guys are answering. Jackie, what is your major concern when you think about online learning?
So this week we kind of experienced it. There were a lot of, technical difficulties, lagging and connectivity issues. And I know some people have shared that they don't know if their devices are capable to handle all the video conferencing and things like that. So that's something you can look into ahead of time, and we're going to discuss that in this session.
Mm-hmm.
Great. I think we can end the poll there.
Yeah.
So the majority of people losing motivation. Yeah. And getting distracted.
Absolutely.
Yeah, that's a major one. And we'll discuss a little bit of that throughout the session.
All right.
Okay, shall we go to the next question?
Yes.
Here we go. Everyone should be able to now do the poll.
What do you think? Sorry, go ahead.
What do you think are some of the advantages of online learning, Rebecca?
Well, for me, I would say the possibility of doing things in my own time. So sometimes, if I have lots to do, I'm going to get up at 1 a.m. or 2 a.m. and just do everything I have to do. And obviously, we're never going to have a class at 3 a.m., right? So I'm happy to be able to do things in my own schedule, in my own time. But as we're going to talk about later, we also have to be careful about scheduling, right? So let's see what everybody thinks. There are some advantages. We have flexibility, ability to view the content whenever, however, you can be on your bed, you can be in the living room, right? And just be comfortable in reading whatever you have to read. Absolutely.
Yeah, and some people really like that. You can reread the content over and over, or re-listen or re-watch the lecture over and over again.
Mm-hmm.
Okay.
So when we think about online learning, we all know that we are living this new situation. Everything is new, everything is different for everybody, right? And so it's important to observe that even though online learning is not something new, particularly, it's now mandatory for all of us, right? And there are many myths about online learning that we want to tackle with you today. The first one is that some people might think that online classes are easier. However, in terms of workload, the workload is going to be the same because the credit course, that you take is the same as if it were a face-to-face class. And so the workload is the same. And in fact, in terms of reading, you might actually have a lot more to read because you're not going to have a person there that you can listen to, right? So everything is about reading, unless there's video or you might have some sort of audio, but most of it is basically reading. And another thing also that we are going to talk about later on is the fact that it opens for a lot of miscommunication. It creates the possibility for a lot of miscommunication because most of it, let's say 99% of the communication happens through written format. Then a lot of miscommunication can happen. So we have to be very careful about that. Another myth that we want to discuss with you is the fact, and I mentioned a little bit about that earlier, the myth that online classes are self-paced. So obviously, on the one hand, you do have the option of doing things, like I said, at 1 a.m. or 2 a.m. However, it's not like you can get everything done in the very first day of class, right? So next week, your first day of class, you do all the course. No, because actually the instructors, they might release the content week after week. So it's not like you're going to get everything done right away. And so it's basically the instructor also sets the pace for the course. You have some flexibility there in which you can do things in your own time, but the instructor actually sets the pace. And obviously you have to keep up with the pace of the course, right? Another very important thing is that many people can think that you are anonymous in an online class. But that is also another myth because in fact, just because you're behind a screen doesn't mean that the instructor doesn't know what you're doing or what time you're doing or how often you're looking into the content. Because in Learn or the other platforms that are used in the courses, the instructor has access to the frequency and the how well you did in the content, that the quizzes that are there, and so everything is actually monitored, perhaps even more than if you were in a face-to-face class. Because in the face-to-face class, you're basically there sitting, looking at the professor, and the professor has no idea what's going on in your mind, right? But when you are in an online platform, the professor can actually keep track of your performance. Yeah.
Great. Thank you, Rebecca. So the fourth myth we're going to discuss is you can access your instructor any time of day or night. Your instructor will usually provide a time frame of how long it will take for them to get back to you. And they usually have this information in their syllabus. And they'll decide perhaps what way you should be communicating with them. Perhaps it's going to be they have office hours via video conferencing, or maybe all communication must be done through email. If you have a question, you should also consider the amount of time it will need then for a response. So if you have an assignment due the next day, you should have already sent your question to the instructor at least 24 hours before, or preferably 2 or 3 days beforehand. And one thing to note just in communicating with your instructor, often your instructor has many classes that they are teaching or many other commitments. So one way to kind of always guide them as to what your question is pertinent to, which course it is just to put the course in the subject line of the email. And that's just a way to direct their attention to exactly where you have a concern. Okay, an online class is more informal than an in-person class. So even though we're all attending classes in our PJs most likely, that does not mean it is less formal. Should be treated just as a regular class. The same expectations for quality of work apply to both online and in-person classes. And academic misconduct can be detected easily online, and academic expectations still apply regardless of the format. Great, so some common online learning pitfalls. We spoke about them, but this is just a summary. The perception of anonymity and lack of accountability. Technology challenges, slow internet, freezing. We're all going to have to learn to have a little bit more patience these days. Potential for confusion about expectations. So we're going to talk about effective communication and a way to direct your questions so that they could be understood clearly. Perception that the same rules do not apply. So citing sources, completing exam independently. We're going to go over that briefly.
Absolutely. And honestly, in that note, I think it's very important for everyone to keep in mind that, so Jackie mentioned, that we all have to be a little bit more patient because things can happen. But when it comes to academic misconduct, the University of Manitoba does not have patience with that. So you want to make sure that you follow the rules, and the rules and the guidelines are clearly stated to us. And so it is your responsibility to keep up. And it's not just because we are not face to face and that we are working remotely that the rules do not apply. The same rules apply regardless of the platform. So at the end of the day, it's not your classmate who is responsible for your work. You are responsible for your own work. So even though you might feel a bit constrained to ask your professor or approach your professor to ask things, especially in the very first beginning, especially sometimes if you're an international student, you don't know how to approach. Guys, don't forget, you have to ask and do not rely simply on your classmates. Only your instructor sets the expectations. So if your instructor says that it's a collaborative work, then it is. If your instructor says it's not, then it's not. So you have to approach your professor if you have any questions, what is possible, what is not. Make sure you approach him or her. When it comes to consulting sources, make sure that you know the rules. You have probably heard a lot about academic integrity this week. So make sure that you are properly quoting, paraphrasing, and citing. Copying and pasting, now because everything is done on a computer, copying and pasting is not nice. So don't try to do that. And be careful and be mindful as well. Yeah. And when it comes to online exams, remember that it's not just because you are an online situation platform that you're not being monitored, right? So just treat the exam as if you were right in front of your professor. Do not take pictures, screenshots, do not reuse material, do not share material with anyone else. Keep everything private and personal to you. You're muted, Jackie. You're muted, Jackie. Okay. There we go.
Okay, thank you.
Yeah.
I have all these background noises, so I'm trying to reduce interference. So the basics of an online course, thanks Rebecca for noting that. So learn about the technology needed to complete the course. And University of Manitoba has an outline, a PDF that you can go and review on this link that gives you the details about what is the basics expected for your ability to work technology-wise on an online or remote course. So the tech, software requirements, and online learning tools, that usually refers to the computer, the connectivity, and the software, something like Office 365, which, by the way, is free to all University of Manitoba students, and there are details on how to activate and download that on that webpage. And also something to become familiar with is online learning tools such as WebEx and Zoom and UMLearn itself. So once you access UMLearn, and you can do this by using your UMNet ID and password, you can then access it on any internet capable device, a computer, tablet, even your smartphone. So once you sign into your UMLearn, it will look something like this. And I just did a screenshot of a course. And one thing you need need to kind of explore and look out for at the beginning of the course is the course information or outline or syllabus, right? So the syllabus should be carefully studied as it provides all the important details for this course. Things such as lecturer and student guidelines, assignment deadlines, when you're supposed to be reading through which module, and topics or readings need to be covered that week. All that information is in your syllabus. So here's an example of what that may look like. You've got your tab here, and then you've got your content. So course syllabus, you would click on that and it would open up the course syllabus. Here's instruction for assignments. That's also something you should go and look at ahead of time so you're prepared and you understand what's expected of you. Just a thing to note that Rebecca was talking about, when your lecturer can see how much or see how accountable you are in the process. For instance, it shows this in the lecturer's view about what you've completed, so what you've looked at and what you've opened. So they can see whether you've opened the course outline or not. Perfect. So now let's go over some of the strategies we're going to cover today. We're going to briefly talk about time management, space organization, effective communication. And I'm going to hand over to Rebecca to talk about time management.
Right. So I am a very passionate person about when it comes to time. Time for me is really precious. And I know that there are many different ways in which people can manage their time. So some people use their phone calendars. There are many apps. There are timetables. Some people like to have visuals and have a mirror or post-its. You might just want to write something in your hand, or each person has a different strategy. And we're going to go through some strategies, and perhaps 3 strategies that we are suggesting for you in order to manage your time effectively in this online time that we are living in. So the first step is for you to identify your time management style. So in Learn, you can find in the Essentials, you can see, these 4 different types of personalities. And why is it important? Because by the time you have to know yourself in order to be able to plan and to live and to manage your time and to live your life, your academic life, in the best way possible. So different people have different lifestyles. Perhaps something that works well for you does not work well for the other. For example, I am an early bird. Literally, I am an early bird. So I would rather wake up at 1 a.m., 2 a.m. than to go to bed at 3, 4 a.m. because I'm studying. So, but I know that some people are, the opposite. So make sure that you are aware of what works for you in terms of time, and be aware too that each personality has their own challenges, their own areas for improvement. So for example, because I'm an early bird, and literally, but in this case, being an early bird means handling everything, doing everything super fast. So as soon as the instructor says thing, I'm getting it done. So on the one hand, it's good because I'm never late or behind schedule. But on the other hand, the problem is that I might not enjoy the process. So I've been learning throughout my PhD to actually enjoy the process of the course, of whatever you're doing. So I encourage all of you to go to the Essentials and take the quiz to find out, or just to see out of curiosity the different personalities and how you can perhaps challenge yourself to improve and to manage it well. And also very important is for you to consider that some people take 1 hour to read an article, and some people might take 5 hours to read an article, and it's fine because we are different. So it's very important, especially now that you are beginning, that you start to observe how long does it take for you to complete certain tasks. So right now, for me at least, I know that I might take 1 hour to read this, or I might take 2 hours to do that. So it helps me to prepare, because the last thing you want is to actually come up at the end of the day and say, well, I didn't have time to do anything, right? So make sure you are aware of how long it takes for you to do each thing that you have to do. And then as soon as you know yourself and you are aware of your personality and how long it takes for you, it's very important that you are also aware of the class schedule. So something that I started talking at the beginning of the presentation, you have to know what the course schedule is, what has to be done, when are the exams, when are the assignments due. And so you have to bring your personal schedule, let's say your biological schedule, with the course schedule. You have to combine those two. So it's always possible to combine. It's just a matter of managing the time. So for example, if you're going to need 5 hours to complete a task that is due in 7 hours, do not go to Netflix and watch, binge watch for 7 hours, because then you're not going to have time. So you have to be aware of how long you need and when the things are due, so that you can combine, right? So these are just some questions that you should be thinking about. When are they due, and are they collaborative? Because when it comes to collaborative assignments too, you have to also combine not just your schedule, but also the group schedule. So it's another level of scheduling. So be aware of that. And the third step for in this strategy is priorities, guys. Prioritize. So again, as I was saying, if you have an assignment due later today, and you haven't even started, don't go play video games. Get started on your assignment. So avoid procrastinating. Procrastination is perhaps the worst thing for any student. And so be aware of what has to be done. If you need post-its, just keep, because sometimes we might forget things that we have to get done, right? So maybe just put post-its around your laptop, things that have to be done, and so that instead of you engaging on something that it's just for fun, or I'm not saying that you don't have to have fun, of course you do, we're going to talk about that later, but make sure that what has to be prioritized is prioritized.
One of the great ideas or sayings I heard in one of these sessions over this week was avoiding procrastination is being kind to your future self. I thought that was really apt. Okay, so some strategies for online learning, space organization specifically. So space organization, pretty much it's personal once again, and you've got to also work within your space and knowing yourself and what you have available to you. So the following questions can be used as a guide in order for you to find what works best for you for the most effective study conditions. So what time of the day are you most productive? Rebecca was saying she's an early bird, so early in the morning she's the most productive. I thought I was the early bird, but then I heard Rebecca's schedule and I think I'm a midday bird, if there's such a thing. And where can you study? So for instance, if you have an apartment that you're sharing with other people, is there spaces that you can use to study? Is there a shared desk or single desk that you can use? I had an interesting debate with a colleague this week about if a bed is a good study space, but with COVID-19 and people not having as many options and spaces that they can study, you need to kind of make a choice. And whatever choice you make, you've got to set boundaries within that choice. And we'll talk about that, about the study constraints very shortly. So what conditions will enable you to concentrate and learn most effectively within your study space, and what are my study constraints? So for instance, some people might need a lot of lights, they might need a space without a lot of noise, or some people prefer music. These are all things that might make a space more conducive to you getting into the zone to study. What are my study constraints? Well, for instance, with me personally, I have a toddler running about the house. So I need an area that I can close off from her. I need a designated space. And I need to be able to have some silence, so usually headphones of some sort. And that helps me create an effective space to study.
And just on that note, something that is coming to my mind too, Jackie, is just, I think, and I think I should share this, I think it's very healthy to have a clear space. So, and I think I speak, I think there is probably lots of research that back me up on that, but make sure that you have a clear space, and that applies to your desktop too, because you want to make sure that you have, light, enough light, and that you have room for your books. Because if you have everything jammed here, it might, I don't think that's healthy for anyone's study. So my suggestion, because it works for me, have everything cleared and as organized as possible so that your brain can actually focus on what has to be focused.
I agree with you, but my friend who studies with me, they work in complete disorder and they still manage to get things done. So I think it's really personal, but
Yeah.
for some types, yeah, a clean space is really important. Me too, by the way, Rebecca, me too. Okay, so sometimes it's beyond the actual physical space, creating an effective study area or mentality. And one way to do that is to designate or to create or find a study friend. And especially now with COVID-19, everything's moved online, and to get an online study friend. So there's many actually ways to do this. You can join, many student associations or communities have an online group study where you can join, have a little bit of a social aspect to your study, and then have set boundaries about this is focus time. So preventing you from being distracted or wanting to go watch Netflix, you're held accountable for perhaps those 20 minutes to sit and work with your designated community or friends, and to just take a break after 20 minutes, maybe discuss what you did, what you found difficult, what you found great. Sometimes that happens. And then to maybe do it all over again. Who knows, maybe another 3 times if you're feeling in the mood. And if you can't find a student association or community to join, we always had the ALC Power Hour Plus, which is available. So you can click on that link and there's different session dates. And all you have to do is click on the session date and you join that session at that time. All the dates and the times are available on that link. So that happens every week, I think, on a Monday. So strategies for online learning, effective communication, and this is a big one, especially when everything's online. So we've got 4 facets that we're going to be discussing: communication platforms, class communication, acceptable communication, and the writing process. Just something to note, it's a term you're going to be seeing a lot within your remote learning courses or online learning courses, is asynchronous versus synchronous communication. So asynchronous means it's not happening in real time. So for instance, if you leave a statement on a discussion forum and then someone else responds 10 minutes later, that's asynchronous communication. Synchronous communication is something like what Rebecca and I are doing now. We are talking in real time and getting real-time feedback. Okay, so some of the communication platforms, and I'm going to go over this really briefly because most people have a familiarity with this: discussion forums, journals, chat, video calls and conferencing, and email. So just to highlight, discussion forums are things that would be connected to your Learn course. Journals could be also connected to that. Chat is something like we're using now in Cisco WebEx. Video calls are something more like Skype, where you would have a one-to-one, and that's something that your professor could be using for their office hours. Video conferencing, something like WebEx or Zoom. There are other platforms that some professors use, but those are the 2 main ones. And that's something they would use more for lectures or for meetings, large meetings. And then email, the old trustworthy email. Okay, so effective communication, class communication, making the most of a remote or online classroom. Participate. So join in the discussions in the forum. Be insightful, do your readings and be able to join in the conversations. Be timely. So make sure that you communicate at the appropriate time. So if you are responding to a discussion forum that was from module 1 and you're already in module 6, or your class is already at module 6, then that's not really going to help you much. It's not going to be timely. Communicate clearly. So try and always, we're going to talk about this in the next slide, but try and think about how to phrase your responses so that they are clear, and always reread those responses. Remember the human. So join in activities. Many lecturers will design some kind of engaging activities in their course, specifically now to engage with their student body that is remote or online. So join in these icebreaker activities and reach out to your peers, be it in an online study session or asking them if they want to decide to join an online study session for the course, or just by communication through the discussion forums. So what is netiquette? Rebecca, what do you think is netiquette?
Well, I know the answer.
Okay. Well, do you want to say it or should I?
Go ahead, show it.
Okay. So netiquette is the correct or acceptable way to communicate online. It is the code of online etiquette you should abide by, especially when in an academic or professional setting. This goes for both asynchronous and synchronous communication. If you want to check if you are netiquette ready, then please go and do the email challenge on Essentials. And that's one way to gauge if you need to learn or work a little bit more on that. Okay, so here's some guidelines in regards to netiquette. Be respectful. Use appropriate language. Seek clarification when required. Remember, this is a formal setting and requires different behaviors and language than that used in social media or with messaging. Sorry, just to go back there. Check your syllabus for communication instructions, and we've gone over that in the previous slides about the contact details and response time that your instructor will prefer. And remember, in email communications, RAR, which is respond, attach, and reread. And that's part of communicating clearly. So always respond timely, reread what you have written, and if you've put in any, you've said that you're going to put any attachments, do double check that you have done so.
Jackie, just one thing that I would like to point out, especially as being an international student. So as I mentioned before, I'm from Brazil. In Brazil, for example, we do not have the habit of addressing a professor as doctor and then last name. So if you come from a different culture or country that has different ways of approaching, you might be a little bit either too formal or too informal, and you might have some questions on how to approach a professor. So one thing that I think could be in the syllabus, the professor might or not say how they want to be addressed. But if it's not written, my suggestion is always be respectful. Remember, it's not your buddy. It's somebody who is supposed to be respected. So I suggest, in your first contact or unless, throughout the term, address by doctor and the last name. And remember, as Jackie mentioned, you're not, when you send an email to a professor, you're not texting. So do not use slangs and don't treat the professor email as if you were texting your friend. So I'm not saying that you have to say dear and just create a whole set of formalities, but be respectful and be mindful. If your professor responds with their first name, then sure, then you can address them for their first name. So that means it's an open door to just saying first name. But I've heard professors sharing both extremes. How sometimes they shouldn't just say hi there and just start saying I missed the class. Can you do it's not like that. You have to be respectful, but also on the other hand, some professors would like the student to actually be a little bit more I'm not saying friendly, but you don't have to be afraid of the professor. It's a human, as Jackie mentioned before. Just wanted to point that out.
I'm so glad you did, because that is something that there was a great session on called Profs Are People Too, and they really highlighted that way to communicate with your lecturer and how that can be a real pet peeve. And you don't want to, the person that's evaluating you, you don't want to be on their bad side. You always want to be on their good side, right?
Mm-hmm.
And in a and I'm so glad you mentioned the international difference, because in a North American setting, the convention or the desired preference is to use professor and last name. So generally, that's a good guideline. If you don't know if what you should, how you should address your lecturer, just say professor and their last name. And as a past instructor who has received some really informal communications, it really makes a difference to be addressed properly.
Mm-hmm.
Great, thank you. Okay, so the writing process. Written responses take time, and this is something you're going to really need to think about. And as Rebecca mentioned in the very beginning of the session, the myth about online classes not needing as much time is that actually it might take more time, because if you're reading more, you're also writing more by communicating through distance. So written responses take time, and you really need to think about the stages of the writing process. So these are the writing stages: pre-writing, drafting, revising, proofreading, publishing. The infographic has a little bit more information about those stages, but I'm not going to go into too much detail about that, because there were quite a few interesting sessions over prep week that you could go and review that will have more details about the writing process. And in general, we're going to mention some of the supports and services, but you can always go to a writing tutor if you're having problems at any stage of your writing process, and they'll be able to walk you through it. And most writers go back and forth through these stages, so you kind of got to find a process that works for you. Great. So as I mentioned previously, there were some really great sessions this week in the Prep Week course, and a lot of them go into more detail about these topics that we discussed in regards to online learning and strategies for coping with online learning. So this is just a selection of some of the courses that you might find helpful. There were also some really great special lectures that were just general, how to deal with kind of an online environment and connecting with your peers and handling stress, that were really great, that I think everyone could do to listen to in some time, take some time off to listen to.
Yes, and as Jackie and I mentioned, we're both writing tutors in the Academic Learning Center, and we are here for you. You know, I talked a little bit about earlier about academic integrity, and you might be nervous, you might feel, you might not feel confident in terms of writing, and you don't want to make a mistake writing with plagiarism or anything like that. So we're here for you, even though we're online, we're still there. So make sure you go to the Academic Learning Center, create an account there in what we call WCO. It's our platform. Create an account, use your Learn, your My Manitoba Mail, create an account there, and throughout the term, you can reach out to us and we can help you with your assignments. We have individual tutoring, workshops, group study sessions, tip sheets. You can find some very summarized information sheets about reference style, for example, in our website, ELA resources. Make sure you go to our website and check it out.
Okay? And just on that, something that students aren't aware of is that as a student, you are entitled to 2 writing tutoring sessions per week. So please do use that. It's there for the taking.
Mm-hmm. And there are many resources. If you're here in Winnipeg or if you're back in your home country, still we are, the University of Manitoba is still working for all the students' well-being. And there are many supports, even though we're not on campus, the supports are still available to us remotely. There are counseling services, student advocacy and case management, spiritual care, academic advising, academic integrity, libraries, student accessibility, tech support. All you have, don't be quiet, don't be shy. If you have problems, if you have questions, reach out. If you don't know who to reach out to someone and ask, who can I reach out to? Just ask someone. Don't be quiet. Don't be behind your screen with a problem. Make sure you talk, make sure you reach out, and make the most out of your academic year, out of your academic program. This is a very I feel I'm grieving a little bit the fact that I'm almost done with my, let's say, my schooling time, because after PG there's not much to do. But if you're in an undergrad, make sure you make the most out of your years. Even though you might be starting out in this situation that is not the best, still try to make the most out of it and feel well. And we all want your success, and make sure you enjoy each moment of your program, and all these resources and others are there in order for you to have the best time of your life in your academic path.
And one thing just to add that we haven't really stressed on this slide, I've noticed, is that, we mentioned in the beginning, a lot of you are saying isolation and motivation. And one way to help with that is to join student communities or associations. And if you go to the AMSU, the University of Manitoba Student Union page, there's a whole list of student associations that you can join and kind of find a fellow community, someone to commiserate and understand your situation and share their experience with. And for international students, I do know that the International Center is thinking of a way to create more of a community to connect University of Manitoba students afar, so in their home countries, with other University of Manitoba students in those home countries. So those are all things that will be coming out hopefully in the next few weeks. These portals are ways for you to connect and not feel isolated.
Absolutely. And so we want to thank everyone who has been part of our workshop today. We definitely wish you the best as you move forward with your studies. Jackie and I are going to stay here for a couple more minutes. If you have any questions related to what we presented, we don't have the answers for everything, but if you have questions related to what we presented, throw the questions down in the chat for us. Or maybe if it's not related, we can try to say who you can reach out to.
I think Emily can throw us some questions.
Yeah,
definitely. So feel free to drop your questions here if you have anything related to online learning. But yeah, I've just been noticing in the chat, definitely a lot of anxiety, which is something that I said in the chat, is so incredibly normal for starting university. If you were not nervous about it, I think there would be something wrong there. I've done many degrees and I've been so extremely nervous every single time. So it's very normal. And then you add a pandemic into it. So this anxiety that you're feeling is extremely normal, and I wouldn't worry about it too much as like an abnormal reaction to the situation. It's a very normal reaction. And I just wanted to say as well that the fact that you're all here at Prep Week, viewing all of these sessions, I was seeing some numbers in there, very, very high numbers of the amount of sessions people have attended. And it's a leg up, right? Like, I think that students that are eager like this, it's easy for me to say, but I'm not too worried about you guys. I think that as long as you put in the time and the dedication, and you look after your own well-being throughout the next, few months as we're all learning remotely, I think that you'll all be fine, in my own opinion, from viewing you for this past week. So, okay, so we have a question right here. So I don't know if you'll be able to answer this, but where would I be able to join clubs online?
So the link that I was talking about is, if you go to AMSU, to their actual webpage, they've got a list of student associations linked to University of Manitoba. And the list is really long. So if you go to AMSU, I think it's amsu.ca.
Somebody posted on the chat, yeah.
Perfect. And then also another resource that I know people are not entirely happy with, but it's Facebook. I know it's sad, but especially now when everything's online and remote, a lot of the student associations have moved a lot of their platforms to Facebook in order to keep everyone abreast with what's happening. So do type in University of Manitoba student, and then sometimes you'll just get like a list. I know the History Association's on there, Mutual Aid is on there. There's a whole bunch. Women's Center is on there. So do go and look out for that. And usually each faculty and department will have some kind of student association.
Mm-hmm. A lot of people in the chat are also talking about there being a Discord as well. So
yes.
Yeah, any way to connect, I think, with the students.
But just to go back to what you were saying, and Emily's a ALC writing tutor as well, so she has also lots of experience in all this and reducing anxiety and dealing with all the stress of all this unfamiliar territory now. And just remember that everyone's going through this, and a lot of the time your lecturer will have a lot more leeway. I can't guarantee it, but they generally do, because it's all new for them too. Remember, this is also a bit of a stressful situation for them, so they understand what you're going through. And University of Manitoba has a lot of resources. There's the Student Counselling Centre that can also help and assist. But there's also the gym that's open if you feel safe going. But really, I feel like the Student Association is one way to really reduce that stress and anxiety, because you share and you become non-isolated that way, because you're connecting with other people going through the same thing.
Mm-hmm. Absolutely. I think there was a question earlier. Oh, if you could just quickly go back to the slide with maybe the resources that were on it. Oh, and remember that this the PDF is also available on Learn, the PDF with this exact slideshow. So
yeah, I will upload it after this. I took it down to prepare for the meeting, and then I'll upload it after.
Okay, so it should be there. Any other questions for any of us?
So this is the link to the Academic Learning Center.
Mm-hmm.
And there's a whole info on how to sign up for appointments. And then this is the link to the student supports.
Yeah, and all of those, again, are included in your tuition already. So you might as well make use of what you're already paying for.
Absolutely.
And the gym too. If you're in Winnipeg, the gym has reopened. You just have to book it. There is a whole system there, but we are paying for the gym, so make use of it.
Exactly.
Okay, looks like there's no other questions for us in the chat, so I think that we can wrap up now.
Thank you everyone who joined us. I hope you have a great long weekend, and we wish you all the best in your academic career now.
Yes. Thank you, Emily. Thank you everyone for joining.
Thank you.
Bye everyone.
And